Good evening. You remember that last night we were taking up some of the basic principles of the infinite way as applied to healing work. And to work with these specific principles will bring a fruitage, even though small to begin with. But one thing, first of all, I must bring to your attention, and that is a requirement that is necessary, a requirement that is foundational, really, to the ability to demonstrate these principles. I'm trying to find just the words to convey to you an idea that isn't normal to our Western way of life or our Western way of thought. I suppose that I can make it clear by reminding you of something the Master said on one occasion when he had been speaking to the woman at the well of Samaria and had forgotten his lunch. And the disciples were concerned and said, "Shall we go to the city and get you some meat?" And he answered and said, "I have meat. I have meat ye know not of. I have meat the world knows not of." And of course, you know, he did not have meat in any visible sense. And he was speaking of a different kind of meat, something that elsewhere is referred to as hidden manna. As a matter of absolute truth, everyone in this world has a hidden manna or meat that the world knows not of. Everyone in this world has a hidden source of supply, a hidden fountain of living waters. Everyone has that, but very few in the Western world are bringing it through into manifestation. Very few in the Western world have access to it. And the reason is this: we live on an outer plane of life. We live through the mind and the body. And we are always doing something or thinking something. We in the Western world have not been taught to have periods of inner silence or introspection or contemplation, and therefore we have cut ourselves off from this inner spring of water, or from this inner supply of meat. We live by bread alone, by food, by water, by air, and sleep. We do not live by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God, and yet the basic teaching of the Master was to the effect that we are not to live by bread alone. He did not say that we should give up eating or drinking or sleeping, but that we should not live by bread alone, by the outer effect alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. How do you get the word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God? You do not get it by reading it or hearing it with the ear. You get it by hearing it from within your own being, because the still small voice is within you, and it is always speaking. It is very much like this room at this moment that is probably filled with programs from all over the world, programs of entertainment, programs of music, programs of inspirational nature, but they're not available to us except in proportion as we would plug in our radio or television. But they're here, they're all in this room. So with us, there is an eternal broadcast going on. But in order to receive it, we must tune in. And it is for this purpose that we, as students of this message, develop the habit of turning within anywhere from 10 to 20 or 30 times a day. Of course, our beginning students do it 2 or 3 or 4 times a day. But later on, it becomes a matter really of 20 and 30 and 40 times a day, because there is no time element involved in turning within. It is really merely a matter of a blink of the eye, which cuts us off from the outside world and reestablishes us in this inner world, where there is the inner spring and the inner meat. Our periods of contemplation, our periods of meditation, or just that momentary closing of the eyes to remember, that makes and maintains the contact so that we can literally say, I have meat, I have strength that the world knows not of, I have an inner source of renewal. I am not tired out at the end of the day, because there is an inner source of renewal, and everyone has it. And our students soon develop the ability to go within and be renewed, hour by hour, moment by moment. We joke about it among ourselves, but it's more serious really than a joke, that those of us who become active in this work find that we cannot get through with our work in less than a 15, 18, 19-hour day, and 7 days a week. All of those of us who are connected with this activity are actually working that many hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you'll notice our students, and there must be dozens and dozens of them in this room, you'll notice that they don't look tired or worn out. And they're not, because they are renewed from this inner source. Now, of course, when an individual turns to this inner source, it begins to change their nature. And if they resist it, they will soon find that they will have to give up this way of life and return to their old way, because this way makes them uncomfortable. It brings to light the, shall we call it, hypocrisies, or perhaps we'll find some other word for it, that we have to face if we are to face this inner world. I spoke something about that last night when I was thinking of some of the news that's taking place in your press this week. I had referred to the fact that in this new book, The Thunder of Silence, the whole idea was showing how we were under the law of the old Hebraic teaching, and how the Master tried to take us from the old Hebraic way of life into what has been called the Christian way of life. And I couldn't help thinking, with this news this week, of how many attended a Christian church today in the face of having retrograded yesterday to about as ancient a form of Hebrewism as you can imagine. I saw in your paper the row that went up because the governor refused to murder a man who had already murdered, refused to have him executed, and another man who has been a prosecutor crying aloud for blood, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Let's send them to the gas chamber. And today probably visiting a Christian church where he's being told about the new dispensation of forgive and love, and neither do I condemn thee, and ye have heard it said of old, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say unto you. Now you see, if you embark on this type of life and you go within, your nature will be so changed it will shock you to think in one moment in terms of the Master's teaching of love, forgiveness, forbearance, and in the next breath of going back to these ancient ways. Well, now that, of course, is an extreme example, but while you may not have to face it in that way, you will in this, that as you go back into this inner self and begin to be fed by it, if you are still indulging lying, cheating, defrauding, false advertising, you find you can't live with yourself. And you'll either have to give up this idea of going within and being fed by the Spirit, or you will have to give up this old idea of self-preservation is the first law of nature. Now, I bring this to your attention for this reason. There are no words, no thoughts, no ideas that will produce spiritual healing in your experience or the experience of anyone else unless those words and thoughts are accompanied by the Spirit of God or Spirit of love or Spirit of forgiveness. In other words, here's the Master again. When you pray, when you go to the altar to pray, and there remember that you have aught against any man, or any man has aught against you, get up and make peace with your brother, and then return to the altar. In other words, you cannot pray and expect the inflow or outflow of the Spirit through you while you are violating the Spirit. Now, the Spirit is love. Love is really the great thing. I'm not speaking of a human sense of love. I'm not speaking of sympathy. I'm not speaking of any of those things. I'm speaking of love in this sense. The love that compels us to deal justly with each other. The love that compels us to forsake that old way of life, that eye for an eye and that tooth for a tooth, or that seeking revenge, or that trying to get even, or that desire to see somebody else punished. All of this must disappear from us if we want answered prayer. I am not condoning evil. I am not saying turn the prisoners loose while they're a menace to society. I'm saying what you're feeling toward them in here. The Master said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. We can have that feeling toward them, even though it may be necessary to incarcerate somebody here to keep them from society for one thing or another. We do not have to, and indeed we are not permitted to, have hate, resentment, and desire for revenge and punishment within us. Not if we hope to pray and live by prayer. And this, I must tell you, is our goal in this message. Over here, as a human, you live by might or by power, physical might or mental might, which is power. But the moment you make the transition into this way of life, you are living by grace. You are living not by the sweat of your brow. You are living not by taking advantage. You are living by a relaxed from human concern, a relaxed inner consciousness, which will never be relaxed unless there is a spirit of love within you, a spirit of forgiveness, a spirit of justice, a spirit of integrity. So it is, then, that in the last analysis, spiritual healing is not accomplished by what we know so much as by what we feel. And it isn't because we feel that we would like people to be well that they get healed. It is because we feel a love, a compassion, a joy in the realization of each other's freedom. We feel that desire to want to witness freedom, not only freedoms such as the Constitution guarantees us if we're watchful and wakeful, but freedom from fear, freedom from sin, freedom from false appetite, freedom from slavery, freedom from poverty, freedom from injustice. When we have within ourselves a deep longing that mankind shall experience these freedoms and know them, we have love, we have compassion, and that is the healing spirit. Now, because there have been centuries of false teachings on the subject of God, we do need to know the truth, as the Master brought out. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Now, that is where the letter of truth comes in, or what we call treatment. Prayer and treatment are really synonymous in one way, but not in another way. In a higher sense, treatment is the truth that we know with the mind, whereas prayer is that feeling of love, that feeling of compassion, that desire for a universal freedom that gives power to the treatment. But the treatment consists of knowing the truth. Now, the first truth that I would like you to know as of the message of the infinite way is this: that evil is not personal. We never are dealing with sick people or sinful people in our treatment. When we are asked for help, what we know is this: that since God is omnipresence and omnipotence and omniscience, the world of God is intact, spiritual, free, harmonious. And that which is presented to us as the appearance of sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, unemployment, wars, and all the rest of these things, this exists only in this universal belief of two powers, or universal sense of separation from God. Now watch this in its operation so that you'll catch clearly what I'm trying to give you, because I realize that most of you have been with us for these 3 nights indicating an interest in these principles, and I know that all of you cannot be in the class, and therefore I would like to give you that which you can take with you and work with. Whether the problem now is yours or the problem concerns a member of your family, or a neighbor or friend, from this moment on, let us forget the particular sin or disease or lack that's bothering you or them. Let us turn from that now and realize this. And I'm going to give you a quotation to carry with you from now until doomsday. My kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of Christ, is not of this world. Therefore, let me momentarily shut my eyes to the pictures of this world and enter my kingdom, the spiritual kingdom, the Christ kingdom. And we will find that in this kingdom, God governs his world. God governs his children. God governs all spiritual existence. Then what of this sick or evil person? What of this disease or evil condition? This then, as it has been demonstrated, proven, this then is the appearance of this world which is not of God. And because it is not of God, it has no foundation, it has no law to support it, to maintain it, to sustain it, or to perpetuate it. Realize this. This evil person or this evil condition, being not of God, has no law of God to sustain it, has no law of God to perpetuate it. And once you have taken its foundation away, the foundation of this appearance, which is claiming to operate through a material law or a mental law, you have begun its eradication, its dissolution. As I look out here with my eyes, I could become conscious of illness, fears, false appetites. But because I'm not interested in what my eyes bear witness to, I'm bearing witness to truth, even though my physical eyes are open, inwardly I have shut my eyes to the appearance, and I have realized God constitutes your being. God is your selfhood. Call no man on earth your father. There is only one Father that you have, and that is the Father in heaven, Spirit. And therefore your very nature is spiritual. Do not forget now, I can't see that with my physical eyes. I know that with my spiritual awareness, with my spiritual discernment. My soul faculties say to me, as they did to Peter, when Peter looked at the Master and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God," so when I look out here at you, my spiritual capacity in here says, "I know thee who thou art, child of God. Thou art the image and likeness of thy Father, and thy Father is Spirit, and thou art spiritual." And this human element that I'm aware of is not of God's kingdom. It has no presence in God, no power in God, no substance in God, no law of God to support it. And with that, there comes an uplift within you. There comes a feeling, a response within you, as if you were hearing truth, the truth about yourself. Because each one of us knows full well our human failings. Each one of us knows wherein we are something less than the image of God. We know that. And yet, within each one of us, there is some place where we know that we're really not like that. We ourselves are really pure. We are, well, Paul voiced it better than any. He said, I know I'm not a sinner, yet there is a sense of sin remaining in me. I'm not a sinner, though. No. It's this other thing trying to come in on me. And so each one of us, at some time or other, has said, I'm not this sinner, I'm not this sick person, I'm not this troubled person. Really, within me, there is something fine, something good, something eternal, something immortal. And in that moment, you have known the truth about yourself. So it is that we who attempt to bring harmony in your experience, we who try to dissolve the discords and inharmonies of your life, this is the way. It is not by invoking the power of God. It is not by asking God to do something for you, for heaven knows that God is not withholding anything. Heaven knows that God does not have to be asked to do something for his own beloved child. Therefore, whatever discord there is in our experience is not to be wiped out by finding a God to do that which God has done from the beginning, but rather by our knowing the truth. Remember that in all of the Master's teaching, there is no place where he says, go and get God to do something for you. His answer is, what did hinder you? Pick up your bed and walk. Open your eyes. Neither do I condemn thee. Thy sins be forgiven thee. In other words, he brought to earth the realization that God's grace is available to us without asking, without begging, without beseeching, but there is a requirement. Go and sin no more. There is a requirement. Love thy neighbor as thyself. There is even a more severe requirement. Pray for your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you and despitefully use you. Don't hate them. Don't seek revenge on them. Pray that their soul be opened. Pray that spiritual light enter their soul, their consciousness. Ah, yes. There are no metaphysical principles that heal unless they are accompanied by a spirit of love, a spirit of justice, a spirit of forgiveness. And if you search around in whatever metaphysical movement you may be connected with or ever have been connected with, and try to pick out in your memory those practitioners and teachers who were successful in the healing ministry, and see if you can't pinpoint them. See if you can't see that each one of those was a bundle of love, a bundle of forgiveness, a bundle of sharing, a bundle of service. And then you'll understand what made them successful healers and not the other people who were studying the same writings with the same teachers. It is not the letter of truth that improves our life. The letter of truth is the foundation on which we build. If only you can perceive that God is too pure to behold iniquity. If only you can perceive that in the whole kingdom of God there is no sin, there is no disease, there is no death, you will then be able to release God and let God run his universe without any help from you or me, and you will work with yourself in knowing the truth. There is no spiritual law to support a disease. There is no law of God to support a sin. There is no law of God to support a false appetite. There is no law of God to maintain an evil person anywhere. As you abide in that truth, you will find yourself so filled with an inner warmth that healing will take place. And the healing takes place because of that inner warmth, that inner glow, that inner love. Now, whether you have started on the spiritual path this week or 50 years ago is of no importance, because No student is so young that they cannot begin to dissolve the discords of human experience in their very first day of study. It involves only two things. One, the ability to remember that no form of evil, no form of discord has a law of God to support it. That is the first step. My kingdom, the spiritual kingdom, has nothing to do with the world of appearances, and therefore realize always there is no law of God to support error or evil in any form. No law of God, no substance of God, and therefore this that is appearing to me is but this universal belief in two powers. Now, to you who are metaphysicians of one school or another, I must say this. If you are working with other principles and finding success in them, do not try to mix them with other principles. You'll be working against yourself. Be sure that whatever principles you decide to follow, that you remain true to those principles, because it will not work to try to mix. And on this path, the major principle that you are going to deal with is the impersonal nature of the evil. Therefore, you never work to improve a patient. You never work to reform a patient. You never try to use psychology with them and tell them to be more loving or more grateful or anything else. Nor do you try to heal them by getting them to read so many pages of a book. Your healing power lies not in what you say to a patient beyond the fact that I will work for you, I will pray for you, I will treat, but rather in what takes place in your consciousness when you face a condition or an appearance of error, of discord. If you are alert to realize this is a universal belief, but without the power of God to support it, you will be successful in dissolving these erroneous appearances. If you are quick to realize whatever it is that appears as an appearance, whatever it is that manifests as a condition, this is not of the kingdom of God, no life of God to support it, animate it, or perpetuate it, you will quickly watch the dissolution of these problems. Watch, though, that you keep your own consciousness free of judgment, criticism, condemnation, because you will not bring forth sweet water and bitter water from the same fountain. And if you wish to bring forth healing, you must bring it forth through a consciousness of love. Not a consciousness that condemns the woman taken in adultery, not the consciousness that condemns the thief on the cross, not the consciousness that condemns the parents of the man born blind, but rather the Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. In other words, there must be the realization that whatever any of us does of an evil nature is not because of our nature, but because we are under the pressure of what has been called the carnal mind. And in our ignorance, we're not responsible for our wrongs. We are only responsible for our wrongs after we have learned of our true relationship with God. If we, through any of our metaphysical or spiritual teachings, have been taught, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. If we have been taught that in one of these teachings, and then we lie, cheat, steal, defraud, we are really responsible and we bring upon ourselves what the Master warned, a worse thing. Neither do I condemn thee, thy sins be forgiven thee, but go and sin no more. If you once accept the principle within yourself, I have only one Father, God, and my inheritance is of God, my supply is of God, and then go back to lying, defrauding, cheating, false advertising, believe me, you are bringing upon yourself something worse than the original offense. Once you have taken this name, you remember it? Lot's wife? She left that old city, that old consciousness of mortality, but she looked back. She got a bit lonesome for it, or a little fearful, and turned to a pillar of salt. So it is with us. When we have left what the Master called this world, you remember he said, I have overcome this world. When you have overcome this world, when you've left it, and you have decided, I shall not live by human modes and means, but by the grace of God. I shall live not by lying, cheating, defrauding, but by this inner grace, this inner spirit. Don't turn back then and try to use those old worn methods. If you have left that old city, if you have come into some measure of consciousness, of spiritual reality, don't try to go back to your old Hebrew days again with an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Don't go back to... We're facing that very situation as a world consciousness today, as the world begins to try Mr. Eichmann. Oh, nobody is going to be able to excuse him. Nobody's ever going to be able to forgive him, really. It'd be nonsense to say that you can. But the question that comes in your mind is this: are you going back to those ancient Hebrew days and say, give us his blood? Or are you going to say, let's bring this trial out, let us show the evils of this human system, and so that it may never happen again? And then let the Lord do with Mr. Eichmann what it will, without any hate, without any desire for revenge, because hating him is not going to restore lost lives. Murdering him is not going to bring back the dead. But hating him and murdering him is going to destroy your soul if you indulge it, unless you can be as big as the Master and realize it's done, it's horrible, but let's not go back to it. If for any reason of public policy it is the wise thing to incarcerate him and keep him where no mischief will come, that's one thing. But let's do it not for hate. Let's do it not for murder. Let's do it out of compassion for civilization, or even for him. He might be safer off behind bars than walking the streets. So probably for his own sake, incarceration would be the best policy. But don't let your own demonstration of harmony be wrecked by going back to those most ancient of Judaic days. Don't do it. And so it is, as you face every situation of life, face it from the standpoint of the Sermon on the Mount. Face it with prayer, even the prayer of forgiveness for the enemy, for those who have persecuted us and despitefully used. Pray that their souls be released. Pray that the punishment be remitted. Pray that God enter their soul, that you are living the pure life, the Christian life. Don't try to be half a Hebrew and half a Christian. It won't work. Don't try to live under that law that ye have heard it said of old, and at the same time try to worship in a Christian church. It won't work. You tear yourself to pieces and you cheat yourself of the rewards of Christianity. there are great rewards in Christianity, just as there are in Judaism. To live completely up to the Ten Commandments brings great rewards. But I can assure you that to live up to the Sermon on the Mount brings greater rewards, because with that comes a freedom that the people who are merely humanly good can never know. The scribes and the Pharisees, with all of their human goodness, could never know the life that the Master knew through love, through forgiveness, through a willingness to disobey some of the human laws in order to be more obedient to the spiritual laws. In healing work, when you have known the truth consciously, when you have declared the fact that evil is impersonal and that it has no law of God to sustain it, it has no person in whom, on whom, or through whom to operate, then you settle back in a period of meditation, so that having expressed the Word of God, the truth, that you now let the Spirit take over. This is necessary in the early years of your healing work. Whether you're only doing healing work for yourself or your family, it is necessary that having declared the truth, you also have a few-minute period of inner quiet. After you have more fully developed this knack of drawing forth from within, then you'll find that it isn't necessary to sit down quite as frequently for those periods of meditation, because you are more or less living in it. The 91st Psalm says, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High." That doesn't mean praying a few times a day. That means dwelleth. That means living, moving, having your being constantly in this God awareness. And so the 15th chapter of John says, if you abide in this word, if you let me abide in you, abide means live. Live always. You can't live a few minutes. Life has to be lived eternally. So if you're going to abide in the word, it means that you are constantly abiding in the fact that there is an inner grace. And that's what I'm coming to. Within each one of us, there is a most wonderful power called grace. It is an inner grace, an inner power that performs in our experience. It acts in our experience. We don't have anything to do with it. It does it all. But before we can come to where that inner grace is released, we have to perform the functions as taught in Scripture. Namely, thou wilt keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on thee. Lean not unto thine own understanding. Acknowledge him in all thy ways. He will give thee peace. In other words, the first few years of our study are apt to be a little strenuous, because we must consciously remind ourselves throughout the day and night of these truths. We must consciously remind ourselves that we are not living an eye for an eye, but we are living the life of forgiveness. We have to consciously remember that the evils of this world are not power. The evils of this world are not power. We make them power by our acceptance of them. Again, you have that in the world today. You have, on the one hand, those who are sure that world peace will be achieved by disarmament. And over here you have another equally large group convinced that you will have world peace by having more armament than the other fellow has. And both of these sides are as ignorant as if they had never seen a printed page, because we've got hundreds of years, thousands of years of history to show that armament, no matter how big it was, has ever stopped a war. And disarmament has never stopped a war. Right in my day, we have witnessed England, when it was the most powerful nation on the face of the world, with an unbeatable navy, and it didn't stop World War I. And we saw England in World War II, when she was disarmed and had hardly enough armament on hand to, hardly enough even to start a war, and that didn't stop the war. Neither being armed stops wars, nor being unarmed stops wars. Do you know what stops wars? The will to peace. If you are going to the international table saying, I'm loaded with guns, all you do is rouse antagonism and fear out here. There's no way to establish peace that way. If you go and say, look, I have no arms, all you're doing is showing a weakness for the other fellow to attack you. There's no peace that way. But let's forget armament and let's forget disarmament. And I don't mean disarm, remember. I mean, let's forget the subject for a moment and agree that neither armament nor disarmament will stop a war. And then you'll say, well, what will? Well, now let's sit down and talk it over. And we will come to something that will bring world peace. And I know this as sure as I know that I'm talking to you this minute. I know that world peace is on the way. I know that it is. And I know that it isn't coming about because we have atomic bombs, because others have them too. And I know it isn't coming about because we're talking about disarmament. Because don't ever believe that we will disarm while somebody else is armed, and don't ever believe that they will disarm while we're armed. So all of this talk about armament is nonsense. But when you stop talking armament and agree that neither armament nor disarmament has the elements of peace, then you'll say, well, what will? And now we can talk together, because the two major causes of war are out of the way. Armament and disarmament are the causes of war, both of those things. But when we are no longer talking armament or disarmament, we let another subject come in. So it is. In your own relationship to life, don't face life as if you had the power to destroy or win, because the two deadliest words in any language will always be victory and defeat. Those are two deadly words. Why? Every time you defeat anyone, you set them on the path of finding some way to attain a victory over you. Every time you attain a victory, you have set up an enemy for yourself. We don't want to be victorious over anybody. We don't want anybody to be victorious over us. We don't want to defeat anyone. I'm speaking of you and me as individuals. We don't want to defeat each other, and we don't want to be defeated by each other. What do we want? We want to come together and talk. And if there are problems between us, let's talk them out. And let's have a solution, but let us not look for victory. And let us not look for defeat. We don't recognize the meaning of this in the Western world, but in the Eastern world, they know the meaning of losing face. And you can't work in the East with victory, because you leave them losing face, and they won't lose face. You make them lose face, they'll find a way to come back and regain face. We don't acknowledge that there is such a thing, but that's our nature too. You defeat us, and we live for the day when we'll be victorious. Even in our little personal affairs. If only we will eradicate from thought the idea of victory and the idea of defeat, and begin to realize that what we want is livingness, equality, justice, mercy, fidelity. Those are the things that are the planks of the American Constitution, the French, the English. All of our constitutions and Magna Cartas are built on that, and yet we have allowed that ancient teaching of victory and defeat to so handle our consciousness that now, when we come into a personal and intimate relationship, as we do in a work of this kind, we're still thinking of victory over sin or victory over disease, and we're still thinking of defeating them and overcoming them, and we're building them up against ourselves. Our motto should be, not by might nor by power, but by thy Spirit. And when you find that we adopt this in our relationship with each other, we bring that consciousness to our healing work, and we don't set out to defeat a disease or a sin, and we don't set out to gain a victory over it. We merely set out to realize God's grace in the midst of us. Just realize God's grace. Do you remember how the Master explained this? The disciples had returned from a trip and were gloating about how even the devil was subject unto us through thy name. And he told them, don't do that. Don't say that. The devils are not subject unto you through my name. Just rejoice. Your names are writ in heaven. And so as you approach problems of sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, unhappy relationships, don't approach them as if you had a power of God to do something to them or a power of truth. Don't approach them that way. Approach them this way. The grace of God establishes me in harmony. The grace of God establishes you in harmony. And that way, you won't have a victory, which means somebody else's defeat, in turn seeking to have victory over you. Don't approach problems as if you had the power of God on your side, which by implication means the others haven't. But approach it with the grace of God establishes harmony. Not only in me, but between us. The grace of God. Trust the grace of God to establish harmony between us. And then you won't have to go back to the Ten Commandments and be told not to envy or be jealous or covet. There won't be such qualities in your consciousness. There can't be those things and the realization of the presence of the grace of God. And so it is, as you go from here tonight, please remember this. Give up the idea of power. Give up the idea of winning a victory, even over the problem that's bothering you. Just realize this. There is a grace within you that governs. And even though you may not understand its operation, agree with me, agree with the Master. I have meat the world knows not of. I have an inner grace. The Master called it my peace. My peace give I unto you. No victories, no defeats. Just my peace give I unto you. And as you walk up and down this earth, consciously remember that my peace is established within you, and your conscious remembrance of it brings it into manifestation in your experience. The only reason you do not have peace is because you are seeking peace, and probably seeking peace through power. Don't do it. Give up seeking peace and acknowledge, my peace is within me. Thy peace is within me. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. And as we go out of here tonight, and you who will not be with us in the classwork, carry this with you for days and days and days until you feel it singing within you. My peace I give to you. And thank you. Thank you.